Welcome to Philosophy from the Frontline. This podcast explores the intersection of philosophy, entrepreneurship, and veteran transition. Join us as we delve into the minds of successful entrepreneurs who have made the journey from military service into small business ownership. Our guests will share their insights, experience, and unique perspectives on life, business, and the world around us. Through deep conversations and thought-provoking discussions, we hope to inspire and empower our listeners to tackle their own challenges and achieve their dreams. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the world of entrepreneurship from a veteran's point of view. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Philosophy from the Frontline. This is episode number 93, if you can believe it. I'm going to get to 100 before the end of the summer. Before football season kicks off, we will have 100 episodes because then I have to go change hats and do Ask for Football. But today we are blessed to have Kelvin White here. He is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, which is a lot of words, of course. But hey, we'll pause there and let you dive right into it. Let's get into your backstory. What's your origin of, who are you? Where did you come from? And how did you end up deciding to, one, go to the academy? Because you are, different person in that respect because you were a recruited athlete, which is a little bit different process from, somebody that just wakes up one day and says, hey, I want to go to West Point versus some of the other things that kind of lead into the start of a career out of the academy. But I'll turn it over to you and let's dive into this.
Yeah, Rob, thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing me to be here, kind of share my story as well. And, Kelvin White grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the middle of three boys. I guess now new age kids, Gen Z or whatever generation we're on would call it humble beginnings, but didn't really have a lot. And I clung to football, sports specifically, just to find my way to kind of break that cycle. And, I had the opportunity to go to West Point to play football. Was recruited by Rich Ellerson, and then was there during the transition to Coach Monken. And football is obviously like my saving grace, my calling card, and it allowed me to kind of get away from the things that kind of plagued my family. First generation college grad, first generation service member, and it's been a blessing. So graduated 2016. I was able to stay at West Point post graduation to be a graduate assistant. I coached the tight ends, the position I ended up playing with Coach Monken in the Black Knights there. And then after that, I was an infantryman. And I can't wait to jump into kind of, what that meant to me, the opportunity I had to represent, people that look like me and you, and just to continue to develop myself over the last 10 years of service. But from there, went down to, the Benning School of Boys and, well, I guess that's not appropriate anymore, but, went to Fort Benning, graduated Airborne Ranger School, and I went to 2CR, which is in Germany, Vilseck, and was a platoon leader there. And I had the opportunity to be selected in fence to go to 375, which is the 75th Ranger Regiment. We'll get into that story a little bit later, but ultimately met my wife in Germany. We eloped in Copenhagen, Denmark, came back. I was a company commander in the 101st. And then had the opportunity to attend Ranger Assessment and Selection and join the 75th Ranger Regiment post-command, where I'm at the Special Troops Battalion now, getting medically retired or medically separated from the service. And we'll see what happens after that. It's been a great run for me. Very, very humbled for the opportunity that I've had to lead soldiers, to develop myself and then transition. I've been transitioning for probably 18 months. And, I'm excited to jump into that with you as well. So
cool. Yeah. So Coach Ellerson, that's an interesting one because, coaching trees are interesting at West Point just because of, the environment there. And, so you were on the field, I guess. And so I'm going to kind of divert a little bit away because I have to ask you, and this is one of the, if you're an Ask for Football fan, they've heard the story 1,000 times about me watching Army beat Navy downrange while we're fighting ISIS. We had it on the 100-inch screen in the talk. But how was it for you, as a former player to be on the sidelines when that game happened? Were you there? What was your feeling? And I think that's an important part of the story because that's a triumphant thing that not a lot of people had. And there was a long time where, success against Navy was a problem, but now, it's, 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row, close to getting 4 years in a row. Class of 97 was the last one to win all four,
right.
But we won't bring that up again. But just really, how did that feel? Because I know that experience probably at the academy was a very formative one, even though you were, a junior military officer. how did that affect you? Because like, I know if you're working with the team every day, that had to be exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, it was awesome. And I don't know that that's why Coach Monken's still there, but that year we also won a bowl game. And if anybody's played that you've talked to that's played with Coach Monken, the first time he came in, he had like a bag of bowl rings and he just like slammed them on the table and he was like, 2007 bowl game and then bowl. And like, he just did it. And like, I mean, my senior year, we won 2 games, lost 7 by 33 points. So we were like in that competitive stage. And then we kind of handed the baton off and you had the, class of 17 was able to, win 8 games, beat Navy, go to a bowl game. Being on the field is like electric. Like I'll never forget the standing, like, everybody rushes the field and it was the first time in 14 years that we had won. And, I thought I was going to have like I was claustrophobic. Dudes were just everywhere. It was just like insane. But just walking back into the locker room and just knowing, that we finally did it, you got that feeling. And then I take it, you already brought it up, but it's similar to like the 4-minute mile. Like nobody could beat 4 minutes. Nobody could beat 4 minutes. And then, once it happened, everyone's like, oh yeah, like this is it. Like this is what we're going to do. So I think since I graduated in 2016, we're like 6-3 or 7-3 or something, I think, with Navy. And I mean, 14 years in a row, you lost. And I was like part of those years. So having been able to coach and be around the team still when that happened was, phenomenal. Great experience for me. Definitely shaped kind of how I felt about the organization as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, it's a great way to get excited, like you have all these other things going forward, you're looking towards graduation, looking to get out into the force, but like, it's that one little nugget of sweetness, like before you departed the academy that really just impacts, and I can remember for years in those slim seasons being operationally deployed, getting up at 3:00 in the morning, pounding coffee, watching it on the AFN and just like hoping for the best. And like, it just didn't work out. But I think, it set the stage for other opportunities. And, and bringing in Coach Monken, like I had the opportunity to meet him because I came out to Fort Bragg a couple of years ago to do CTLT with quite a few of the football players. And it really was an interesting opportunity. Very unique man. And I will say this, and, not to give the other 2 cats any accolades, but, Troy Calhoun and Coach Ken and, Coach Monken are tailor-made for their organizations in which they coach.
Yeah.
I may not 100% agree with all the methodology, but some of them, but I can tell you 100% they have put their stamps on those programs, and, that impact is tremendous. So let's get back to your transition story. I know you said that you were in the middle of the medical transition piece. We don't have to get into the deep and gory details, but, is this a decision that you're good with, or is it a decision that you're trying to make the best out of? Because I think there's a point in everybody's career where they have to decide, like, am I in for the long haul? Am I getting out in the middle? Or is there other opportunities out there? And typically for graduates from academies, they have the 5 and fly mentality. And if you make it past that 5-year point, you're usually end up doing a career, unless something happens. And it sounds like you had that something happen in the process. So if you don't mind, if you want to get into the story, you absolutely can. We don't have to go too deep unless you want to. So I'll stand by and turn the floor over to you again.
Yeah, great. Well, I think it's, it's perfect time for like a story. And I mentioned I was in Germany, single lieutenant. I was just like to me, I thought I was the baddest dude since sliced bread. Before we jumped on the call, Rob, we were talking about, branching infantry and just like having that, that kind of aura, that demeanor of like, you got to be the baddest dude. So I was like ready to go. I struggled passing Ranger school, whatever. Once I got it done, like, you couldn't tell me anything. And I got over to 2CR and had the opportunity to be fenced by 375, as I mentioned. And, I tore my ACL in the Turkey Bowl. Made it through 18 years of football, big stage football, never hurt, never injured, some tweaks and things, but, tore my ACL, like non-contact, like ruptured every single thing in my knee. And that was in November. I was supposed to go to RASP in March. And that was like the lowest point. I talked to a couple other guys about it, Sal and Steve. And it was really tough for me, right? Because I didn't have anybody. I lived on the third floor of a German apartment. I drove a 328i Beamer. So I'm 6'4", 250 at the time. Like, it was just bad, all around bad. And I ended up living on my platoon sergeant's couch. So him and his wife, their 2 dogs, they literally took care of me for 8 weeks, non-weight bearing. Had to learn how to relearn how to walk. And it was just a humongous crucible event for me because, I just struggled. I've never been hurt before. I lost the opportunity, I thought, to go serve in the special operations community. And, that's where I thought my purpose and my passion was, and then divine intervention, I met my wife, and it was the best thing that's ever happened to me looking back on it. But, residual effects from that, I'm still in the infantry, still pounding the pavement, still running, still lifting, still doing all that stuff. Command a company in 101st, go back to assessment and selection. I'm in the 75th now. I go on a rotation deployment to the Middle East and doing counterterrorism stuff and just overuse. They got pretty banged up. Then I tore the rest of my knee up while I was deployed and came back and, the doctor's like, dude, you're 32 years old. There's no way that your knee is supposed to look like this. So all of this stuff kind of adding up to where I am now, I'm going to have to get a knee replacement soon. And just being in the infantry, that doesn't bode well for you. I know there's a lot of people that have hip replacements. There's a lot of people that have the things like that continue to do it. But I think to answer your question, Rob, I'm at peace with it. Yeah. I'm married to a service member as well. My wife is a captain in the Army, much better officer than I am. And we're moving to South Bend, Indiana. She's going to be the Army ROTC instructor there, the assistant PMS. Nice. And, we have 2 beautiful children. My daughter Tatum is 3. My son Deuce, Kelvin II is, just turning 18 months. And it's great. And, without getting into the sappy stuff, my North Star right now for me, Rob, is to be a present father and husband. And some of the things that I was doing and rotations to Europe to support the Ukrainian effort there when I was a company commander, and then the deployment for counterterrorism. I missed a lot of my daughter's life already. Yeah. This past December was the first birthday I spent with her since she was born. So for someone who didn't have that relationship with their mom and dad, I was raised by my grandparents. It was right. It was the right timing. And for me to be there for my children, to be there to support my wife and kind of put her in the driver's seat of her career. And, because she had to tag along. If anybody knows anything about dual military spouses or couples, somebody is the star player, right? And for me and my wife, it was me. We went to Triple C together, Maneuvers Captain Career Course in Columbus. Then we went to the 101st, and I went to selection to RASP. She followed me the whole time. So, now it's nice because she commissioned from Notre Dame a year after me, so class of 17, and now she gets to go back there. I think it's a great feeling, and I'm very excited to be able to support her in her career now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's important. So, and that's part of the transition piece that typically we don't really think about, right? Because, like I said, we do an annual pilgrimage to Disney as a family, and that's because I'm paying back all the things that I missed for operational deployments, 23 years of service in the uniform. You miss out on a lot, and so it sounds like you've already transitioned in your mind. So if it works out that you can stay, great. If it doesn't, that's cool too. And I think that's one of the difficult parts of understanding, leaving the uniform, is that, you're going to get some things back. You don't know what those things are most of the time because you're so focused on the mission that you forget that, I have a family. Yeah, I have, dogs, mom, dad, cousins, brothers, family that I want to see. I couldn't tell you the last time we had a quote unquote family reunion. And those are usually typically tied to, some unfortunate event. Either it's a wedding or a funeral, right? That you go to visit people in your family and even your friends. And that's the other part about the military too, is when you were a kid, your family would say, oh, those people are never going to be your family. I would argue that military people are a little bit different. And I think that's one of the exceptions of the culture, is your friends your family is not your blood when you're in the military. My closest friends are people that I've served with and spent time with, whether it be sitting on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan or running down the street in, Baghdad, Iraq, or whatever. Those are the people that you cling closest to because they've had, mutual experiences, and those mutual experiences are important in the development of us as adults. And so I find that super important. So sounds like you're moving to South Bend. So you're going to be hanging out with Touchdown Jesus. I don't know if I'm going to like that very much. Don't give any inside gouge, especially after what happened this last season. So we won't hold it against you. But as part of that, it sounds like, the Airborne Ranger thing is a huge part of your identity. And I know for me, I had to shed that identity twice. And so the first time I had to shed it was when I transitioned into electronic warfare. So I retired as a cyber officer. So I did, VTIP, EW transition course, and I was electronic warfare guy. And then, the Army decides like, hey, we're taking your cross rifles away and you're going to have, the cyber logo, which hurt, and then again, it was hanging up, the uniform at the end and transitioning away from that job, and doing something different. And so completely understand that part of it, but I know that's probably challenging for you. So how do you feel about that? Because it's always great to lead. People always ask me like, "Oh, you look so young. You look so young," and it's like, well, when you're an intercollegiate athlete for a little bit, and then you hang out with a bunch of wild people that have a lot of energy and a lot of time to work out, and your mission is to be physically fit so you can accomplish the missions of the U.S. government. It makes it a lot more of a pressure cooker. So what are your thoughts on like just transitioning away from the dudes, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, that's I told you I started a while ago, right? It was definitely a mental thing first. To your point, like the identity, right? Like dudes see me now, like they assume that I played football. They assume that I just like my stature, right? Like that's part of my identity. And I'm always going to be like a big tight end body looking dude. Like I can't get rid of that. But I would tell you the transition happened mentally first. And then I started putting my energy towards who I want to be after. And, so it was challenging, right? I missed balls and I missed things with the organization, but, I had my old battalion XO, he's still there, whenever the med board came down and it was like, yep, you can med board. He said to me, they replaced Nick Saban in 4 days. He was like, the Army is going to continue to move on with or without Kelvin White here. And you think about it, like Nick Saban might be the best college football coach, ever. And the fact that his legacy was moved on with quickly it puts perspective into stuff, right? So sure, I'm going to miss it for sure. I know I am. So what I did, I started to, find organizations where I can volunteer back. So I volunteer for Team RWB now. It's a nonprofit ran by Mike Irwin. I think he's a class of 02 from West Point. And it's about that physical bonding, right? Like everybody knows that veterans are fighting against, PTSD and other things. And we're losing veterans at a pretty alarming rate. But the same thing you talked about, physicality is part of being an infantry officer. So if I can get together and do hard things, the Taji 100, the rucks, the runs, and I'll never ruck again. Let me just backtrack. I'm never ever going to put weight on my back again and walk unless it's my daughter or my son. But the physical, getting out, breaking a sweat, the camaraderie of Team RWB is huge. So that's why I'm an Eagle leader here in the Chattahoochee Valley. And it just means a lot to me to be able to put that energy back into the void that I'm going to eventually have. Cause I can still wear the uniform until, probably mid-April is when I start terminal leave. So, it's just being prepared for that and not letting it surprise me. So again, starting super early, going out, making my mind up of this is what I want to do. Here are the things that I want to do, putting energy towards that. And then here's what I want to be when I'm done. And I'm an aspiring tech salesman. So whatever that looks like, I just want to continue to build relationships, do consultative selling, and just like cling on to tech because it's never going anywhere. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, Rob.
That's awesome. And I like to hear that because I'm a big tech nerd too. Understanding technology is look, if you say, hey, I got to get my kids to teach me how to upload a podcast on my iPhone, we can't talk. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that is because my level of understanding is a little bit broader and deeper, so technology is an important thing, but you touched on a really good point. And this is one of the things that a lot of people really struggle with as they leave the military. It's that hard pivot, right? It's that hard pivot from, hey, I have a schedule. I do PT in the morning. I come in at 9:30. We have the early morning meeting. We do, all these things that we need to do until lunchtime. We break after lunch, and then we go do all these other things until the afternoon. Maybe we have a, night rotation, or we're doing a jump or something like that. And so there's always some structure there. And then you go from the structure of the military to, hey man, you're on your own. You got to decide what your day looks like, which sounds cool, right? Like when you're in uniform, you're like, oh man, this is going to be great. I'm gonna have so much time to do so many things. And then once you transition out, you're like, oh crap, like what am I going to do today? Like when I woke up on March the 1st of 2020, right before the world shut down and I didn't have to go into PT, I was like, well, damn, what am I going to do? Because I grew up as a military brat. So I had 40 plus years of being around the Department of Defense and going, hey, all right, this is going to be great, or it could be not be great. And, and the whole pandemic thing shutting the world down is just like a deployment. At that point, it just felt like one. Can't go out, can't do anything, got to stay on the compound. It's pretty much, Operation fill in the blank freedom. And I think we all kind of did that. But I also think like it drove the point, it allowed me to transition mentally even faster because I wasn't in the middle of like trying to decide. And like I worked with a lot of small businesses and done some business coaching and things like that. And it's a great opportunity for people moving forward because like you have a lot more knowledge than you think.
Yeah.
But it's again having the confidence to make that pivot. And I think a lot of people get leery of like, oof, do I need to make a decision right now? And sometimes you have to because like you're in the firefight, like, and I have to make a quick decision and live with the consequences. Or in your case, it seems like you have a little bit more lead time so you can be more deliberate in that process. But either way, always go back and review your strategy. And I think that's one of the things that military leaders that are good always go back and review the strategy. People that are kind of flying by their seat of the pants or just getting the participation trophy are folks that are like, well, I'm good. I don't really need to think about it too much, but I'll wrap this thing up by asking you one last question. And it's like, hey, is there anything like that you've discovered during your transition that was helpful? Like book, mentor? I know you mentioned your old battalion XO, and was there somebody that kind of pulled you aside and said, hey, Kelvin, like here's a nugget that you need to put in your rucksack and pass on to other people to help them as they move through, navigate through the force?
Yeah. So I've been extremely lucky, I think, and luck favors the prepared. But I think back to your point about reviewing strategy is like you also have to have a plan. And a lot of guys that are a lot of people transitioning are like people have done it before me. Like it'll just happen. Like there's a timeline and all this stuff. And I think you mentioned something about DNA. I think before we got on the call. Like everybody is unique in their own way, and every single transition, regardless of if me and my best friend right now are transitioning at the same time, like my best friend in the Army, and our stuff is way different. Like the way that I'm approaching it is different than he's approaching it. And like we both been through SFL TAP, we all did that stuff, but you have to have like a significant plan where you like all of the things that are important. And I think part of the plan that people overlook is, and here's my nugget of success, is like you have to know yourself. Like you have to put in the time to do the assessments. You have to put in the time to learn about what you want to do, because everyone's like, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like that's cool and it's like kind of funny, but at the end of the day, it's not. Like you either need to know like I know that I don't want to do this, or I know that I want to do this. Either one is fine. But in order to get to that landmark, you have to know who you are. Take the assessments. You may think that they're corny. You may, nobody wants to like talk about themselves or, kind of know their own story. But like, I'm in the Special Operators Transition Foundation, and phase 1 of that is just like going through emotion wheels, talking about your past, learning about what you want to be, coming up with an executive summary of like, here's who Kelvin White is, and like my executive coach in that transition foundation is Abigail. And she was like, I give so much credit to her because I knew my identity. I was a football player. I was an infantry officer. I was a Ranger, tabbed, Ranger scrolled. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be fine. But it wasn't until you peel all of that stuff back to where like, that's why I'm so comfortable with my North Star. Right. And that is why I'm so comfortable being a present father and husband and knowing that I can take care of my family, without just jumping into something. Right. Like I'm in this program called Missile. It's military and sales and leadership at Cisco. And I'll wrap this thing up, but I got a job offer there and I just didn't take it because in my gut, I was like, I'm not going to wake up and I'm not going to like want to run through walls for this person. I don't want to do something where I'm just collecting a check and like, not being satisfied and happy. So like everybody's like, wow, I can't believe you did that. But I have options, right? I don't need to do that stuff because I've taken the GRE. I've got accepted to grad school. I'm continuing to develop myself, read books, as you mentioned. If anybody wants to get into tech sales, A Qualified Sales Leader is probably the best book by John McMahon. I had a post on it on LinkedIn a couple days ago, but talking about sales pipelines and stuff like that, sales cycle for enterprise sales, like those are the things, right, that are going to continue to prepare you. But you can't prepare yourself if you don't know who you are. And I think that's probably my tidbit. And start early, talk to people, reach out, find people that you want to be like, find people that you want to emulate, reach out to them and talk to them. You'll be surprised how much you have in common with them, and just always reach out. No, the worst someone can say to you is no, but the best someone can say to you is, here, come under my wing and I'll take you up here. And I think you just got to find that by, being out there. You got to press the flesh. You've got to call somebody. You've got to text somebody. You've got to, cold outreach on LinkedIn. You've got to do the stuff to get the results. And I'll end with a quote by Coach Monken. As I mentioned, that transition for me was crazy. I played quarterback for 7 games my sophomore year, and then I transitioned to tight end wide receiver. And my last play of my career was a Hail Mary in the Navy game, 2015. You can look it up. It was like a 65-yard throw. It was sick, Rob. Anyways, the whole point is, like, in order to do something you've never done, you've got to do something that you've never done. And I think this is my first transition from the Army, and I'm doing everything that I can and reaching out and talking to guys like you. So that's it for me. Thank you so much, Rob.
This has been great, man. And what I will tell you is, like, having a plan is important because, again, we all know, there's 2 famous quotes, plan doesn't survive first. Yep. The plan doesn't survive first contact with the enemy, or everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Like, everybody that's ever been around any type of contact athletics completely understands that. But it's just a thing for humanity, right? Is understanding that no matter how hard I plan, there could always be a curveball, right? And again, if that curveball happens, are you prepared for it? And as a military planner, we always think branches and sequels anyway, right? So if you've been in the military and you've written a plan at all, you always have some kind of alternate solution. And that's mid-tier company grade, junior field grade kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that's the truth, is like having branch and sequel of what your base plan is. It's like, hey, I'm going to go this way. If I don't like it, I can go this way, or I can try this other plan. And, as a fan of football, you would understand that it's the triple option, right? Read the fullback, I pull it, I turn the corner, I pitch, right? Or whatever. It's RPO. It's football 101. And if you're a football type person and you're oriented, or if you're a golfer, you got to know which club to use. Whatever sport analogy you want to use, it makes it more useful for you as the consumer or as a person that's involved in the process to find that. sales books are great. Understanding what you want to do. And you'll be surprised that like a lot of graduates from West Point do pretty well in personal interaction type stuff, whether that be sales or business development or whatever, because you're comfortable talking to people and you've been challenged with harder stuff, like trying to memorize the front page of the New York Times, before you step out and get smoked in formation or whatever. Right. So those are all parts of who you are, and you have those inherent skills. It's just digging them out of the bottom of the duffel bag because they haven't been used in so long. And so I think that should be a confidence thing for everybody that's listening in the audience. It's like, hey, look, at some point I'm going to have to dust off all these other skills that I picked up along the way. Some of them like, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense at that moment, but fast forward to 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you have that opportunity to move forward, it gives you a little bit more connectivity and some options. Like you said, having options is the most important part, is because as a veteran, you don't want to work for the sake of working. You want to work because you enjoy it, because if you enjoy it, then you're working for free. We all know that saying, like, hey, if I work 100 hours a week at something that I'm really passionate about, I'm not really working, Sure. And so that's a very important aspect of it. But we're going to wrap the show. We're right at 30 minutes, which is cool. Again, try and keep these between 25 and 30 minutes, which is the average commute for a normal human being into the office, so they can listen to this coming to or from work. But I really appreciate you coming on today. Very, very insightful, man. Like, you have a very different perspective, just based, again, from your transition story, unique to each person as it is their DNA. And so I really appreciate you giving a little bit of your time today to talk to us and our audience about transitioning from the military. This has been Philosophy from the Frontline. I'm your host, Rob Robinson, and we will see you guys on high ground. Thanks. This concludes this episode of Philosophy from the Frontline. We hope that you found this insightful, inspiring, and learned some real-world lessons from those who have been there, done that. If you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, keep pushing forward. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the organization, employer, or group. All content is for educational and discussion purposes under the fair. This has been Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground.